So, I want to go back to your Seraphis performance results because that's obviously a really big milestone in the context of Monero moving to a better way of doing its ring signatures. So, can you give a broad overview on what type of research you did, what you found, how things are looking, and you can also include all the fancy disclaimers that people should know before they take these numbers sort of to heart or really run without understanding the full context.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Right. So I wrote a proof of concept of Seraphis for several uh, design variants, like implementations of the protocol with different like design decisions that affect performance. And I also wrote up or I coded um, mockups for CLSAG and Triptych for performance comparisons with these protocols. So I have all these protocol mockups in a similar, they're designed similarly so that they're comparable. And then I ran some performance tests with these mockups with a wide range of parameters. So parameters that include how big the ring size is, or how many inputs and outputs the transaction has, or how many transactions you batch together when you verify, because there are benefits to batching transactions together when you verify them. And then I made some plots with the results and put you can find those in MRL issue 91. So what are some things I found? I found that, as expected, uh, proofs using like so Triptych uses this Groth Boodle proof that I call Groodle. These Groodle proofs instead of CLSAG, which is what we have right now. And Groodle proofs are much more efficient than CLSAG when you have large ring sizes. So as expected, and also note that Seraphis can also use Groodle proofs. So my proof of concept uses Groodle proofs for Seraphis. And what I found, as expected, is that for large ring sizes, both Triptych and Seraphis perform much better in terms of both transaction size and verification cost when the ring size is large. So larger than um, like what we have now is 11. Um, let's see what else. So I also found that one of the variants of Seraphis that I call Seraphis-Squashed performs better than everything else when you batch verify transactions. So this squashed variant uh, moves some of the protocol or the proof logic from the membership proof into adding more range proofs. And range proofs, we use bullet proofs. Bullet proofs can be batch verified for significant savings. So I have this, which was kind of a unexpected result, because my early testing, I kind of thought that, I guess I didn't do enough batch verifying testing, so I saw that the bulletproof range proofs individually cost quite a bit, but when you combine them together and batch verify them, then you get a big savings. So yeah, so we have this squashed variant, which is pretty cool. That's performing better than everything else. I also found, what else did I find? I found, so when you have this ring, the ring size is so it's with these Groodle proofs, to define the ring size, you have to define a base and a power. So like 2 to the power of 4. And if you change the base, then changes how the proof performs, both in terms of the proof size and slightly in terms of verification costs. So if I found that if I increase the base to 3, then the proofs are slightly smaller as a function of the ring size. But if you go to like base 6, then it causes larger proofs. But at the same time, changing the base has such a negligible effect on verification time that all the bases are the same. So I think the result of this kind of question, this parameter, is that there are 3 ring sizes that are like good. I think are good candidates for consideration for if Seraphis was implemented, and that's 2 to the 7th, I think, which is 64. Or is that 6? 2 to the 6th, 64. Uh, 3 to the 4th, which is 81, and 2 to the 7th, which is 128. So 64, 81, 128 are candidates, I think, for implementation. Even though these Groodle proofs are more efficient than CLSAG, they are still quite expensive as you increase, as you double the ring size, you are going to double verification costs, more or less. So I don't think we're going to be able to get anything above 128 for the ring size. What else do we have here? Right, so I also found that the squashed variant scales a lot better as you increase the number of inputs to a transaction than the other variants, because since some of the proof logic is moved into range proofs, now as you increase the number of inputs, you increase the number of range proofs instead of that same logic in the membership proof. So this logic that's increasing in the squashed variant can be batch verified, while the same logic can't be batch verified in the other variants. So as a result, the squashed variant scales better with the number of inputs to a transaction. I also investigated whether it could be efficient to, so bulletproofs, you can combine multiple range proofs in one proof structure, or you can separate them into separate like proof structures. So you have like chunks of data and you separately, these are separate things, or you can combine them all together into one aggregate proof. So I investigated whether it could be more efficient to split the range proofs in a transaction into multiple chunks. And what I found was that it is if you do not batch verify range proofs, then it is more efficient to split, in terms of verification costs, it's more efficient to split proofs into multiple pieces, especially as the number of outputs in a transaction grows. Because, yeah. But if you batch verify over like 25 transactions, you combine you batch verify all the range proofs in these 25 transactions at the same time, then it turns out that if those transactions contain split range proofs, then they will verify slower than if they all contained combined range proofs or aggregated range proofs. So my conclusion is that splitting range proofs is not more efficient, because we have to design for a world where blocks have many, many transactions. So batch verifying is something we expect to be commonplace in the world where we are concerned about verification costs. Let's see. Finally, oh, did someone wanted to say something?
No, I also just wanted to, I mean, continue. I also wanted to make sure that other people knew that they should ask questions if they have questions.
No, sure. The last thing I looked at, I have this variant called Seraphis-Merge, and this, so in the other variants, it's possible for multiple people to provide funds to the same transaction. So multiple unrelated people to provide inputs to the same transaction. Seraphis-Merge is a variant that disallows this, so only one person can provide funds to a transaction. And the benefit of merge is that you get a little bit smaller transactions. But the effects on verification costs are negligible. So I think that's a trade-off that'll be interesting to talk about. So I think it's about 96 bytes per input are saved if you use merge. Or on the other hand, you can have this ability to collaboratively fund transactions.
I have two questions to start there. One, do we allow collaborative merge currently on CLSAG, or is that even possible? And two, not suggesting this is a good idea, but would it be possible to allow most of the time not use them, but most of the time take advantage of the efficiency if someone's just spending on their own. But if someone wanted to merge together, they could spend with the less efficient format.
So right now it cannot be done just because, or it can theoretically be done if you hard fork, but it is not possible with the current protocol because of how. So basically, a CLSAG proof has to sign all the other data in the transaction. So you have to know about all the other proofs before you sign your proof, or before you sign each of the CLSAG proofs. So it's not very practical, I guess, to collaboratively fund transactions. But in terms of Seraphis, I think you'd have to have two different transaction types to allow that. There's just no way around it, because the merge part is just a different way of constructing a proof. So it would be distinguishable on chain.
Well, I have a couple of questions and some comments. The first one that came to my mind is, and I know there was a brief discussion of this, is the possibility of using GPUs for verification. And what impact, well, of course, one could significantly lower verification times in this. And my other one, of course, is to try to get absolute figures, and that is, which I mentioned in MRL, but the basic idea is if we're going to make judgment calls as to, what is an optimal ring size, and I think we need to be looking at what the specific specs and number of threads and so on that are used on a CPU versus what's available in the market, so that one can get a real handle where we stand vis-a-vis what's, commonly used in high-end and mid-range and low-end CPUs that are around. So those are my 2 points, questions. The other one I want to mention was from the perspective of the fee structure. It would appear that to me that with Seraphis pretty well, anything under 256, which at 256 is really above, would be fine without having to make any changes to a fee structure. The main issue there is if you go over 3,000 bytes, then you have to change the minimum penalty-free block size, which is equivalent to 300,000 bytes. Otherwise, we could reopen some of the issues of issue 70 in the process.
Yeah, that's a good detail to keep in mind. So with the GPUs, I have no idea because I don't know anything about GPUs. So someone would have to try to implement it and then see what happens. The other question was, so I think I wrote I put together an Excel template for the test output for the current commit on my perf branch. So if anyone could run the perf branch and then give me the output, or I could give them the Excel template and then plug in the data, paste in the data, and then the graphs will update nicely to show the results from whatever machine ran the test. So I think that might be useful. People would just want to run the test. But yeah, I can't like make any judgments about what numbers people get or whatever. That'll be something other people have to think about.
Well, no, I mean, I think what we needed to be is just to test it, but Excel would be significantly slower than what we would actually be running on the
Excel is just for the results.
Oh, right. Yeah,
based on the results. As far as multi-threading, I don't know. I haven't looked into that at all, so I don't know.
But it should be parallelizable. I mean, basically,
it should be.
I mean, yeah, and that, because essentially what happens is most modern CPUs, I mean, you can get like high-end CPUs, you can get like about 24 threads. So parallel processing and multi-threading is going to be actually be critical here, especially once we start getting into significant transaction rates.
I think that would be that might be easier to test if the proof of concept was more integrated with the code base. So right now it's pretty isolated. Because the current code base is, I'm pretty sure it's multi-threaded. So the kind of design choices that would be affected by performance results leading from multi-threading, those are like parameters that can be easily changed with a constant.
Okay.
Like the ring size or the ring size decomposition, or the enforcement of inputs and outputs.
I mean, I guess the issue that comes to my mind, I mean, I'm seeing a 20 milliseconds per transaction as sort of a cap on this. And then you ask the question, okay, how many transactions per second will the chain be able to support with given CPUs that are available in the market? And then what percentage of the block time we're going to use for verification? And in theory, I mean, and if it's significant compared to the proof of work, then of course it could be a potential that this could be, in theory, I guess, design an ASIC to try to take in an advantage, because effectively a portion of your proof of work becomes verification.
No, that's true. That's a good point. Although with pool mining, at least, you're just mining to a block template. So you just get this blob of data that the pool operator sent you.
But the thing here is, of course, is then that gives more control to the pools.
Yeah.
And this is the part. And this is the part that. So there are some delicate issues here, and this is what I'm getting at. Obviously, if we go to GPU verification, then I could see that not being an issue if it's significant gain there. But I mean, essentially, you say, okay, you've got a CPU coin, because so in principle, a mining node could shift a significant amount of hash power into verification. But then you get it's attackable, and so you kind of sort of going back from the behind and saying, okay, now we're opening the door to CPUs and even a specific Monero ASIC, in the sense that you would be able to just write an ASIC to do verification.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean.
I mean, it's an interesting element here that we have to look at. So this is why I think absolutes are sort of important, because we need to sort of get a grip on what happens. And the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is how does all this scale with Nielsen's law and Moore's law? And Moore's law is sort of in a generalized sense. What we're seeing, of course, is not any significant increase in CPU speeds, but we're seeing a significant increase in the number of cores and number of threads. This is how the growth is happening right now in the CPU industry. So we still have this sort of Moore's law like, which is not really Moore's law anyway, because we're talking three-dimensional chips and we're talking all sorts of other things. On one side, on the transaction size side, we're dealing with Nielsen's law, and that seems to me that's not the biggest limit right now. Once we start talking about gigabit connections, which are getting to be fairly common, particularly once you make the leap to fiber in the home, or fiber to, then you suddenly are talking multi-gigabit connections. I mean, we haven't even, so that doesn't seem to be the biggest problem. I see verification as probably the biggest limit in the short term, or short to medium term.
I think that this question of what a device can handle hasn't actually been studied by anybody yet. So I think this is something that really, it's kind of an open research question that someone really needs to jump on and investigate fully. Yeah, it's been brought up a couple times, but I don't think anyone's actually said, "Hey, I'm gonna figure this out."
Well, there was some very early work done, but I thought it wouldn't be particularly relevant right now. I think going back to 2014, 2015, when people were saying, well, what it can handle. That was even before Ring CT. The numbers that were thrown around. I mean, I guess sort of this is why one of the main issues when we do tests, of course, is to release all the specs on the particular machine in question, which actually does provide a lot of information, because then you can do basically what you can do is, okay, here are the specs of the processor. Then you turn around and compare it to what's available in the marketplace, and you kind of get a feeling where the thing is actually sits as far as how accessible that computing power is.
Yeah, I did put some details about the computer on the
that's
report.
Yeah, that's the key thing. So if you actually know what the specs are, I got one thread on this processor, and then one can and you have the actual specs of the processor. Then you can figure out, okay, how does this pass mark, or how does this CPU compare with what's in the market? Where does it lie? And the number of threads that you're using, and then you can get an idea of what the potential availability with, say, reasonable, I would say, consumer and enthusiast CPUs is available, and that kind of puts effectively a cap on what the sort of dynamic cap on the transactions per second of the blockchain is going to be. I mean, that's kind of the area. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the area that gets really interesting in the sense of trying to figure out, well, can we push the ring limit size, for example?
Maybe we should make a call to action for somebody to jump on that. So it's not something I'm really enthusiastic about. Well, not enthusiastic, but like not my area, I guess.
It's totally fair. You can't test with every single possible computer. You just need to test. For your case, you take the same computer and you see what the comparative results look like, right?
Yeah, that tells you whether a particular protocol is better than another.
Which is what he's doing.
Yeah, which is what you're trying to do. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, it's at the second level where you're trying to figure out, what is available and how realistic that is.
Of course. I just because it's been an hour, I wanted to take a second to go over some final things you wanted to cover, and we can keep going for a little bit if people want to. I don't have much more time, but